I'll give the floor to Carlos, who's in the room, Carlos Senti, who's founder and CEO of the World Innovation Alliance. And continuing with our theme, Carlos, you also have a connection with Jean, where you're a presidential advisor. You're also a global shaper at the World Economic Forum. So you seem to have a very broad perspective on things, and your own alliance that you founded and that you're CEO of the World Innovation Alliance. Can you tell us a bit more about that, please?
Well, thank you very much. It is a great pleasure to be here. Thank you so much to the European Economic and Social Committee for the invitation, and also to all of the people that have been involved in the organization, and also to all the speakers. As you mentioned, I am the founder and CEO of the World Innovation Alliance, which is a private organization that brings together companies, institutions, and extraordinary individuals, social entrepreneurs, experts, and members from 150 different countries to find and apply specific scalable solutions for problems in health, environment, economic development, and education. We work on innovation that can help to maximize the positive effects of public and private organizations, but also through the approach of for-profit social impact, or doing well by doing good, social entrepreneurship. How can we not only make money or make an impact, but how can we use all our resources, economic, technological, and human, to create a positive impact in society, in the environment, but in a way that it's also sustainable economically. As you mentioned, I am also a proud member of the board and presidential advisor at GEN, where there's a lot of really interesting initiatives to foster entrepreneurship and also to advocate for measures that can help to create more companies. And in fact, it is a moment where we should really pay attention to anything that could help us to create jobs. It is estimated that 50% of jobs are going to change because of technological disruption that was before COVID, that was before the war. And there is also estimate of 2 billion people in need of drastic upskilling or reskilling to just catch up with the market. There are so many indicators that seem to point towards a really, really difficult decade, that I believe we really need to do everything we can to leverage our resources to collaborate effectively between not only the public and the private sector, but also engaging citizens, making sure that every person is able to participate in the co-creation of a better future. And this is something that can be done in a very practical way. There's a concept that's called crowdsourcing, where you distribute tasks to anybody that can really be extremely useful. And if you think about it, there's millions of people in the European Union and elsewhere that want to be a part of the solution for the problems that they see, but they just don't know what they can do, how to do it, or they don't have the right incentives to do so. And that's part of the problem that we want to solve. How can we engage all sorts of partners? How can we engage governments, associations? How can we engage universities, but also individuals? You have experts, scientists, and researchers that are doing extraordinary contributions, but many times they need connections, they need platforms, they need a voice. And it's not obvious to me that we have developed the right platforms and the right bridges to connect these different silos. Besides that, I am also working and serving in the board of the World Humanitarian Forum, which is a very important organization fostering humanitarian support, especially in situations like the one that we're seeing right now, but not only. And I think that precisely it is the combination between the public and the private, between the companies and humanitarian aid, and just simply putting together different disciplines, different sectors, we can make a greater positive effect. But also we need to never forget that economic prosperity is absolutely fundamental. And we keep just talking about, obviously sustainability and many other topics. But if we don't have jobs, and if we don't have the capacity of creating companies, and if there are so many taxes, regulations, and problems to create companies and to hire people, then we cannot move forward. There is a new generation, and I will finish with this, that I believe is not just a matter of age, it's a matter of the time that we were speaking before about, which is the generation that really wants to make a difference. And it's not just that companies say that because they want to look good. Well, some people that work in companies that I know really care about things, and not everybody, but still the trend from companies, governments, individuals all over the world is to actually try to make things better. Now, the question is, how can we really leverage the resources, and how can we make sure that we don't misallocate resources? Because I think that there is really important challenge ahead of us, a huge converging crisis between the economic, the supply, the health, but also cybersecurity and many other things. And if we don't work together, it's going to be extremely difficult to deal with it, with these challenges. Thank you.
Great. Okay, thank you, Carlos. And a lot of what you said talked about kind of mechanisms for achieving, going towards that. It would be interesting, Carlos, to hear about a kind of global perspective on this. And I think you can give us that, because each of these ways of moving forward involve international markets, but they also involve the EU as a trading bloc dealing in a global context. And we know everything is interlinked, and we know that sometimes we outsource the environmental damage that we do, for example, or even the social damage that we do through these global networks and global markets. So do you have a specific perspective on this in terms of sustainability?
Well, thank you very much for the question. I believe we need a broader view on sustainable development in general. And I think that the guidance of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals is wonderful, because it's not only about a specific issue. It is a comprehensive vision, a compass that allows us to see what would represent a better future. And it is something that allows us to also to see 169 very specific targets that help to improve the situation, right? And I think that the focus should be not in change, because many times we think about change as if it was the perfect solution, but many times things are okay already, and we just need to focus on what can be improved without breaking what is already working. And focusing on improvement, I think that we need to see all the different topics, including job creation, including health, including education, and maybe many other topics. And I think that there are a lot of really positive elements to recognize in the current trends that we're seeing. On the one side, according to the United Nations, only focusing on the UN SDGs would be able to generate 380 million jobs and $12 trillion. We also have a very positive element here when we see that, for example, the CEO of BlackRock, Larry Fink, that decided that they would only invest in projects that would have a positive impact in society and in the environment, or at least that would damage the least possible. But also the trend that we see in impact investment in general, which is this investment on projects that can be positive for our growth as humans and also in the planet. In 2012, we had $13 trillion of impact investment, and in the next decade, it is estimated to raise to $150 trillion. So the difference is obviously massive, and the tendency is really positive. And I would also like to point that there are many very concrete ways to fill the gaps, the gaps that we're talking about here, and how can we go towards utopia, whatever we can get somewhere in the middle. The reality is that there are a lot of very good examples and case studies, and I'm going to mention a couple. One that I believe is really, really valuable is one that is done by MasterCard. They have a program that's called Doing Well by Doing Good, which is everything around these sustainability and sustainable development strategy that has to have some sort of positive effect also in their own business. And one way to look at it is, well, what is the best possible thing we could do with our resources that could help the most people and at the same time could potentially be beneficial for us? And the project that they're doing in financial inclusion is extraordinary. When you don't have digital tools to pay or to receive payments, you have a very difficult time participating in job creation or in economic development in your own community, wherever you are in the world. And there are many, many millions of people that don't have that. Well, they had a program that helped 500 million people gain this capacity of operating digitally. And it was so successful indeed that they decided to go to 1 billion. Now, the question is, if you're able to operate digitally with transactions, then you're going to generate more opportunities. But also, if you are MasterCard, then you're going to benefit from that, because you're going to be able to have some sort of business of those transactions. Not always, but sometimes, right? There's many, many examples of circular economy that are working also in the for-profit social impact kind of mode. And you would have, I would say, one example that is very connected to the with climate and with the environment in general is EcoWild, for example. It's a company founded by a Spanish person called Javier Goyaneche. And what they do is they collaborate with fisher boats to get plastic from the oceans, and they use that to create the fabric that they use for their fashion brand. And they are so successful that not only are they doing that for their own company, but other companies want the same storytelling. So they want them to sell those pieces of fabric. And at the same time, some governments are hiring them to do exactly the same. Companies like L'Oreal with their L'Oreal for Future and L'Oreal for Youth initiatives, there's example, and you also have companies that are working on, for example, education that is absolutely vital, and we don't talk about it when we're talking about impact because climate has monopolized the conversation, and I understand the importance of it. I just think that education is also important, and there are companies that are doing a great job in helping upskill the population. Without the right skills, digital skills, financial literacy skills, but also skills for entrepreneurship or skills that can allow you to find a job or create one, it's going to be very difficult to face what's coming. And I happen to be extremely lucky to lecture in many universities all over the world. And one thing that is common across all my students, and they are MBAs in India, you have people that are studying masters in Egypt, and you have people that are just undergrads in Colombia. Every single time, they lack vision of their strategy for their career development. What are their options? What kind of career can they build? Where can they make money? And they keep thinking that the model where you have studied a university degree and you're going to get a job somehow, that model, and that you're going to be working in a company forever because that's how it's going to be. It's over. It's over because people don't want to stay in the same company, and it's over because the market is not generating that possibility. So when we think about impact, we need to think about all the different I would say all the different aspects to it, like the UN SDGs does, and we need to focus on all the things that we can practically do that are so beneficial for every stakeholder involved that there's no conflict of interest. You just do your business as usual in a way that you use your resources to improve things as well. I think it is absolutely vital to understand that every business is people-to-people business. It doesn't matter what you're doing and what you're trying to accomplish. Human resources is crucial for anything you want to accomplish in the future. And obviously, with the great resignation and the war on talent that we're seeing, it is more and more important for companies to incentivize the talent and to find ways that make the talent really want to work there. And as much as it is true that there are companies that really don't care at all and they are just destroying everything, I do see a positive trend, and there's more and more investment and more efforts, and sometimes it's just a matter of the fact that society is pushing really hard, and also regulations, and so the trend is positive. It should be faster, and I completely agree. But regarding the HR part that we were also mentioning, is like, what do you do with your teams, or what can companies do with their teams? I do see how well-being that was mentioned by Evelina is absolutely crucial, and it's something that companies are starting to realize as well. And there are a lot of programs for well-being, and especially after the pandemic, there has been a critical element of mental health that has been implemented, and that it's obvious that we need. And I think that every single employee, just like every single citizen, needs some sort of support sometime, and some sort of coaching, mentorship, or help, or just empathy, right? And I think that companies are moving in that direction. And even if they're not moving as fast as they should, the trends are really going to accelerate very fast because of the social demands for that. And what I see is that there are a lot of opportunities for companies to really engage employees and to attract and retain the talent that they so desperately need right now. One of the concepts that we're advocating for is what we call crossing borders. In companies, just like in every other aspect of society, we have silos that are pretty close between one department and the other, one division and the other, one market and the other, one sector and the other, right? And also we see the huge barriers, and a lot of people talking about inclusion and diversity, but they really don't create the connections that are needed in order to fight the problems that we have in that regard. I will give you just one example of how this plays out. Crossing Borders, which is the initiative that I'm talking about, is connecting people of different sectors, different professions, different divisions, different countries constantly at all levels. And one of the reasons to do that is because you have 60% less chances of hating an entire group if you have just one friend in that group, So that means if you have one Muslim friend, one Chinese friend, one person in the other side, whatever side you're talking about, you have a much better chance of having a positive relation with a huge part of humanity. And that is something that does not only speak about something positive in terms of values, but also it talks about something good for business, because as many reports suggest, having a diverse group of people working together gives you much better ideas and much better business outcomes. So I think that any policy and any project and program that we can implement in our companies to create more connections between individuals of different levels, of different countries, different cultures, is going to be useful. Programs of well-being, programs of upskilling that was also mentioned, all of that can be really, really important. And I do see how the mental health element to that, as was also mentioned by Maria, is something that we cannot underestimate. The human beings need connections, and with the digital remote work that we have right now, we have a lot of advantages, but the reality is that we really, really lonely, and a lot of people are suffering from that. And a big part of why people want to leave their companies is because they're lacking that kind of engagement. They're lacking the leadership and the vision of a purpose that was mentioned as well, and they're lacking the sense of participating in the actual outcome of the company. And by when I say that, what I mean is that we should encourage every employee to participate more actively, give them more space, more opportunities to actually contribute with whatever they have to the bottom line and to all the other aspects of the value that a company can create, and incentivize that with extremely clear results. What we do is to design models that can help maximize impact. And we design those models, and then we train, we do consultancy, or we do advocacy of those models. And the biggest issue that we're facing constantly comes from two main places. One is aligning interests. It's extremely difficult to find a way to make something that you want to do that may be positive for the environment or positive for society to be useful for the person that you're talking to. That person in that particular role, in that particular department of a company, in a sector. And aligning that is extremely difficult because people have to work. People have to put an extra effort to move things, and they have to use their own political capital or corporate capital to convince people that may have maybe they have something else to ask something about, right? And so one of the issues is, how can you make the project that you're proposing, the solution that you're proposing, to be useful for the person that you're talking to directly, and their bosses, and their bosses' bosses, and the whole organization. So interest alignment is crucial, and we've been doing a huge effort to try to connect the dots. And when you connect them, you still have another problem, which is the legal status or the legal format. What I mean by that is that even though a lot of people recognize that there is a possibility of making impact and money at the same time, the reality is that we have the idea or the status right now where you have either a for-profit company or a non-for-profit organization. And the problem with a non-for-profit organization is that, well, there's different limitations that you have, which is fine. But also there are things like in Spain, you want to create a foundation and you have to put $10,000 euros. And so you want to create a foundation so you can raise money and you can do things all non-for-profit, and still you have to put $10,000 that you may have or may not. So the problem with that is that when you operate as a company, there's a lot of grants, there's a lot of opportunities, there's a lot of things that you cannot do. You just directly are moved to the CSR department of a company, for example, where there's way less budget or there's way less opportunity. Whenever you're talking to any foundation or any government body, most of the grants, if not all, are mainly focused to NGOs or foundations or large organizations that already exist. So it is very difficult to work as an individual or as an entrepreneur or as a small company. And the suggestion that I have for that applies for job creation, that applies for impact as well, is that we as citizens should be able to operate. Of course, we need to be taxed, and we have to find the best way to do that. But we should be able to operate as individuals directly. So we should be able to sell P2P, peer-to-peer. We should be able to create all sorts of transactions, and we should be able to raise funds, and we should be able to demonstrate that we have used those funds properly and be scrutinized, obviously. Because if we're doing something non-for-profit and we are benefiting from some tax deduction or whatever it is, then obviously we have to demonstrate that. but every person should be able to sell something. In fact, when you have a personal teacher that goes to your home, normally that's something that happens, in the submerged economy, and it shouldn't be like that. It should be just every transaction that we do digitally can be taxed directly, and every person should be an entity in itself that can be a company sometimes, an individual sometimes, and a non-for-profit sometimes. So those two elements, I would say, interest alignment and the legal status, and how can we make it more flexible so every individual can find opportunities everywhere instead of having to create an entire ecosystem that probably is just too difficult for them to create to begin with.
Okay, and I mean, that's why this is a good space to have these conversations as well about regulation and setting the right rules. But we do finish on time anyhow. I'm not going to like recap everything that everybody has said because you all put it so eloquently yourselves. But I do want to thank you for your leadership and your time in coming forward today and speaking so openly and sharing your stories with us. I think it's important to say that at the EESC, as members, we're in a very privileged position. And I think we're very lucky to be appointed here and to have a term of office here for 5 years at a time, and to have the support of excellent staff and facilities here to be able to co-host events like this, or to have access to the decision makers. And a lot of the access that we have is can only really be valued if we're not just representing our own networks, which of course we do, and they in total add up to 97 million citizens. So as members, we are connected back to the citizens and the networks of Europe, but also to bring in other networks that each of you represents as well, so that you can take advantage of the privilege that we have in having access to the Parliament and the Commission in order to try and influence change, and in order to identify the very practical regulatory tools that can help make a difference, or identify the ones that are getting in the way and are barriers to the change that we can all see needs to happen. So on that note, I'd also like to thank Caroline and Gaia, who've put a lot of work in, along with the rest of the team from the NAT and the SDO, and just wish you all a very happy birthday, happy Maria's birthday day, and also a happy Civil Society Day. And thank you that we got through the whole session talking about intergenerational without anybody referring to me as old, Killian. I really appreciated that happened as well. So yeah, thanks a lot, and bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.